What's this thing about?
What's the topic? Yeah, what's the topic today, Sanjay?
So, well, you two want to do, podcasts around failure, and as we all know, we've been witnessing a colossal failure at
Yes.
the moment, which is basically, we're locked down. So, just as a reference point, um, we had another pandemic from 1918 to 1921, if you remember.
Didn't that stop World War II?
Well, it went concurrently with World War One, right?
That's
if
what
you
our
remember.
president said.
Yeah, but what I was trying to get to is the state of the art. And 50 million people died. The state of the art to keep the pandemic, this they call it Spanish flu.
Wait a minute. 50 million people died. Was Trump president?
No, we'll get to it. But the state of the art in those days was wear a mask, keep social distance, and lock down in your home. 102 years have passed, and that's the state of the art. It's just flabbergasting to me that we can do better than that.
Well, wait a minute. To play devil's advocate, if 50 million people died, I think worldwide, how many have died now? Less than a million? So we're
more than a million.
How many people have died, Sanjay?
About a million. It's approaching a million.
So isn't this?
It is now about 798,000 dead as of 2 days ago.
Okay, so wait a minute. So in 100 years, we've gone from 50 million to 700,000, number one. Number two, as a percentage of population, world population, we've done actually pretty well. So, like they say, it is as it is. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is we're...
Mark's not smiling.
No, it's 2.3 million infected, 800,000 people dead, and U.S. has 178,000 or so as of this recording.
Yep. So let's look at it differently, right? So the world population today is 7.8 billion, and the U.S. is 331 million, which is basically 4.2% of the U.S. population is world population, the U.S. population.
Yeah.
And we just said the infections in the world for COVID is 23 million, and dead are 798,000. In the U.S., the infected are 5.8 million. And that is 25.3% of the world population.
Yes.
Right? And the dead are 178,000, which is 22.2% of the world population. We're like 5-6 times more. And mind you, this is the richest.
You mean the number of dead is 5 to 6 times higher than our percentage of world population?
The number of dead is 5 times higher. So 4.2 times 5 is approximately 22.2, which is the percentage of world dead is in the U.S. And little over 6 times is the percentage of people infected.
Well, wait a minute. I'm just going to apply the logic of the Trump administration, and the one thing I'm going to ask you is
there isn't any.
Okay, but what percentage of the population, using the same sorts of numbers, how did we stand 100 years ago? In other words, what percentage of the population, world population that died when the Spanish flu came around was U.S.? That is, give me a similar set of numbers, and I'm sure you don't have them.
I don't have it offhand, but I know it is not 22% of the world population by a long shot. But also the numbers were unavailable, right? The U.S. deliberately tried not to publish its numbers, and it was not just the U.S., it was everybody.
Oh, you mean back then? Back then, Sanjay?
Was it?
Did the U.S. back then purposely try not to publish its numbers back then?
The U.S. and other countries as well, because they were in a war, remember First World War, and that's why they didn't want to publish it. But it actually started in a garrison in Kansas City in the United States, yet it's called Spanish flu because they were neutral in those days, and they're the only ones that talked a lot about it, or their press did, and suddenly it became the Spanish flu.
Okay, let me interject with statistics from CDC.
Okay.
You guys can crunch the numbers.
Oh, wait a minute. This is
faster than
fake
me.
news. This is fake news. I don't
No,
believe you.
this is real news. It's from
They don't have the
CDC.
numbers anymore.
500 million,
Yeah.
or 1/3 of the then world's population became infected. Deaths were 50 million, so that's 10% deaths of the infected, and 675,000 in the U.S.
What's your point?
I don't know what's the percentage. So 10% of the people infected died, and 675,000 of the 500 million. 675,000 U.S. citizens died out of the 500 million that were infected worldwide.
That's 12%, correct,
Yeah,
Sanjay? 12% of the world.
Let's do that real. 0.675 million died in the U.S. Out of 50. So really, you just double that, it equals. So 1.35% died in the U.S.
Does that sound right?
I mean, the U.S. had 1.35% death out of world population dead.
Yeah. Well, it is estimated that 1/3 of the world's population became affected in 1918.
Dead to dead. It's a little bit morbid, but I'm just saying 675,000 died, right? So that's 0.675 million, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Divided by 50 is 1.35% died in during Spanish flu.
I just want to point out to you guys the bigger picture here, which I think you're missing, which is that numbers, what is it, lies, damn lies, and statistics, which is if 3 college graduates, and maybe all of us have postgraduate degrees at this point, can't readily come to agreement on or figure out what the numbers are, who's to say?
No, we just did. But wait, no, we just did. 1.35% of the people, dead people in during Spanish flu were in the U.S. Right now, today, 22.2% of the dead are in the U.S. I mean, that's an order of magnitude difference, right? I mean,
I agree with Sanjay.
That speaks of the failure, the magnitude.
Wait. I got to call my friend Steve Bannon and ask him what my retort to that is.
Yeah, he's no longer on the boat, just so you know.
He's I thought he was on the yacht. Is he in jail now?
I think he's been released on his own reconnaissance.
Oh, good. Reconnaissance.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that really bothers me is that we have readiness for everything, right? All sorts of terrorist, threats, military threats.
I am ready. I am ready, even as we speak, for my battery to run out. So we are ready.
Exactly, right?
We are a ready country.
And even though all the experts were speaking of pandemic, and we actually got wake-up calls with SARS, Ebola, H1N1, and all that, this country has not been ready for something like this. And once it hits, say, oh yeah, it's another Ebola.
I have a feeling this is all a run-up to the introduction to the topic of today's show.
Okay.
We were doing a show. I just thought the three old friends were shooting the poop.
So what's your point, Sanjay?
Do you call this a show? Is that what you call this?
Well, the point
calamity
is right there in front of our faces, which is it's just been a colossal failure. And
can we blow the
national scale? I know you guys do podcasts about failures of companies and all that, and there's good learnings, and it's a little bit of painful for the founders and the investors of the companies. This is effectively a company of 330 million people, and there seems to be no leadership, and there seems to be no recognition that this is a failure, and let's start getting to work. And
so Sanjay, this is, if I look at, the analogy I would use is we're customers, we're paying, taxpayers, paying customers of this. We're kind of, we've got this one incumbent captive provider, which happens to be the U.S. government, and they failed miserably. Just to kind of take it from that standpoint. And we're having to go try and figure this stuff out on our own. Yeah. But the problem is it's a highly transmissible disease, and up until 5 months ago, we were all highly mobile, and now we're obviously.
Yeah, but let me ask you guys this, which is how well else has and by the way, I'm going to blow our family friendly rating and say, we're suffering through this shit show now here in the U.S. But as I look and read the paper, I get the sense that other countries at times do well and at times do badly. So I'm not a huge fan of, if you couldn't guess, this administration. It looks like it's a complete crapshoot on whether you, whether and how and what time you come out well on this thing or not. Who would know?
I disagree. I mean, you look at our adjacent, neighbor, Canada, and again, you guys are better at these numbers than I am. But
it's our 52nd state.
Yeah, well, they've done a whole hell of a lot better with the same set of
there's nobody
climatic circumstances.
Yeah, but there's nobody lives there, Mark. It's like
it's like the size of California.
Yeah, I know,
so
but
population is equivalent to California.
Yeah, but it's the size of all of Russia combined. I mean, including the all the what is that?
Just talking about the width. But if you just do it by population, it's equivalent to California. And California, as hard as they tried, kind of went at it alone. So you look at it again. If it's population to population, Canada's fared a lot better.
Yeah, in these things, what they normally do is they do per capita, right?
Right.
Tests per capita, deaths per capita, and all that. I'll tell you, the U.S. takes the trophy on pretty much any metric. And I'll tell you, by the way,
there's a joke in there somewhere, by the way.
Going from admirable to deplorable position, right? I mean, look, the U.S. GDP is 21.4 trillion, which basically, and it's been a leader that way globally since 1871.
That's right.
So that means it is 23.5% of the world GDP, almost a quarter of the GDP produced by 4.2% of the people.
Wow.
This is amazing. These numbers.
If they're working so hard, you just
and it sounds like it's equivalent to the infection rate.
But you'd expect them to get sicker. If they're working so hard, you'd expect them to be sicker. It's just a cost of doing business. I got you.
So it's more than the leadership. I believe. It's also. But here's another question for you two, very smart gentlemen. What percentage of the GDP is the healthcare industry?
It's 10 or something like that.
Mark?
What percent of the GDP is the healthcare? Oh, it's probably like 2.5.
2.5% of the GDP is healthcare.
I'm going for 10. I'm going for 10.
Okay, you both are fairly far off.
No.
In 1980, the healthcare was 9% of U.S. GDP.
See, I'm close.
It started creeping up, and 10 years ago, it became 18% and stayed about there.
Oh,
that's what I said, 18%.
Yeah. So imagine anything that grows. I mean, if you move the GDP percentage by 1 or 2%, it's a big freaking deal. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's family.
Frickin'.
I don't think it's on the list.
In 10 years. And
you have to ask
notice it, right? I mean, our health insurance bills and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But my point is, if it's taking up that much of the resource, I mean, it's like buying all the, aircraft carriers and missiles and all that, being ready for war. We spent that kind of money, and the war happened, and we're not protected.
Well, the obvious solution is to spend more on the postal system, right? I think we should get those sorters back in the postal whatever they call the offices.
The problem with that comment is that makes this podcast somewhat dated.
That was yesterday. That was this morning's news.
Exactly. But I mean, this is the point where those of us at failure say, but there's got to be a better way.
Yeah. So,
Sanjay, you must have one.
Yeah. So for your listeners and for you,
we don't have
August gentlemen,
we lost.
I will explain the state of the art, right? So the state of the art testing for COVID-19 is called PCR, polymerase chain reaction, right? So it's basically you're trying to identify a particular DNA and basically multiply it, grow it effectively, right? So it's biology, and it takes time to do biology, 12 hours minimum. And the longer you wait, the more accurate or specific you become. The problem with that approach is that it's a great, it was, by the way, invented or discovered by a guy in
Mark Thurman. It was Mark Thurman in 1980.
Is that right, Mark?
Mark.
Yeah, it was discovered by a guy in 19 I believe 1985 or so, and it worked great, right? So when someone says, "Oh, we nabbed someone by their by DNA test and the criminology and all that," it's that technique. It's a centralized technique. It's done in labs and so forth. It's it's great for onesies and twosies.
Oh, right? Wait a minute. These are labs with fax machines, right?
Basically, right? These are very
large. Oh, teletype. Maybe they have those. What are those things called where you push the button down like on the Titanic? What was that thing called? A Morse code machine, whatever that was called.
Oh yeah.
Telegraph.
Yeah. So the PCR is the a tool of choice and is great for onesies and twosies. You cannot do this at scale because it's in a centralized lab with PhDs running it and all that. And and it's been very effective, by the way, in detection of AIDS virus and genetic defects and criminology and all that.
Should we be offloading this work to the Department of Health and Human Services? I'm sorry, Mark.
They're Morse code. Right? They're leading it, but the point is here's the issue. The FDA was, I know.
Now I can't figure it out. Oh, wait a minute. Stop.
For the one listener who's still here, Mark has interrupted our otherwise productive podcast with a replay of the Morse code.
I did what Dave usually does, where he inserts insipid sound effects, much to my chagrin, to try and piss me off. And I figured I'd turnabout's fair play. I'm sorry.
This is the worst podcast ever. Keep going. Sanjay's trying to be serious.
Yes.
No, this is like so. We need at least a million daily tests.
Right.
Maybe more like 3 million daily tests.
And a lot of Morse code operators.
With whatever technique, right? But we're doing a third of a quarter of that. And furthermore, this particular complicated test needs 11 consumables.
Mark, do you get the sense that Sanjay has something in mind?
What's that?
I said, Mark, do you have a sense that Sanjay has something in mind?
Is there a better way? I wonder.
Of course, there's a better way. There are many, many good ways, right?
But before you get into that,
but first you need to understand PCR and the technique being used. Right. Right?
So let me ask you a question, Sanjay. You and I both had the experience of taking our freshmen to college. I did mine Monday of this particular week. I'm assuming your daughter went as well.
No, she's going on the 30th. The moment she gets in, they're going to do a test on her.
Yeah. So
don't reveal any secrets because I have not yet been to college.
It's clear. So the thing I was going to say, and then I'll go back and shut up. My son had to take one test. They mailed it to him, and he had to do whatever, mail it off, and he had the results 48 hours later. And then when we arrived on campus, they handed him a small test tube of I don't know what
too much detail. This is getting bad.
About 3.5 inches, and he had to open it up, and it had a swab. And he had to go around 15 times inside his mouth, put it back in and shake it up and hand it back to the guy. So
wow, gross.
I'm assuming PCR was the first one that he took. What's the swab test? Is that also PCR?
A good question, Mark. Unusual.
I know.
So
a blind squirrel finds an acorn every night.
It's very unlikely that it was the PCR if he did in his mouth, right? Because saliva has a lot of noise. The type of coffee you drink, what you ate today is going to be noise, right? And that's and yes, it's this virus is a respiratory virus, and that's why there's some of it in your mouth, but very little.
Well, we do breathe. We do breathe through our mouths, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you really breathe through your nose, and also very few people put more things up their nose, like coffee and all that. They might put other things in, but the nose has.
That was the 80s, and most of us stopped.
In the 80s, I once laughed with a mouthful of M&Ms and they came out my nose. I must say that was painful.
Yeah, and the reason you shove this thing so far up as if it's going into your brain is because the concentration of the virus up there is very high. And you want the virus and not too much of other noise. So if he did swabbing of the mouth, most likely it was not PCR. PCR is, the older version is an 8-inch, stick swab. The newer one goes halfway up your nose, and the really new recent ones is like just in the surface of your nose.
Would it work better if they use dental floss?
Where does the dental floss come in?
I don't know, goes into your teeth. That might be better. It's a
Or in
thought.
your case, mental floss.
Keep going, Sanjay.
So anyway, there are many techniques, right? PCR is considered like the gold standard.
Yeah.
And I think
you're not going to tell us it isn't. I hope
it's considered the gold standard because it's been, the FDA is, in my opinion, full of people who are biologists and chemists, and they understand that technique.
Well, that's why the Department of Health and Human Services is taking this over.
Yeah, and now they're giving it back to the.
Well, they're not burdened by science. Yeah, well, they're giving it back because they got confused.
Regardless, if the rule-making body is not familiar with new stuff, then we're at a disadvantage, even though we spend this much in healthcare, right?
Isn't that guy Fauci from the FDA?
He's NIH.
Oh, same thing.
NIH is under CDC, I think, right?
Yeah, see, that proves my point.
I think Department of Health
Just
and
a bunch,
Services, but
it's just a bunch of government letters.
To us it's like the U.S. government, federal, right?
Yeah, they're all the same.
And it's like big companies, nations that are totally separate, and they want to keep their fiefdoms and all that. And while they're doing their fiefdom stuff, people are dying, and this is the failure that We'll be talking about this for decades, maybe centuries.
Well, wait a minute. Mark keeps saying, but Sanjay, there's got to be a better way, and you've not told us the better way yet.
Well, so this is
a lot of foreplay here.
Yeah, this is what I think. So, beyond PCR, there are many methods. Let me just just go run through them.
Okay.
So, most likely, what your son did, Mark, is CRISPR based, right? It's gene editing based, And there's, companies here in Cambridge, in California, that have the IP in CRISPR. And
did he eat crackers, Mark? Did he eat crackers? That would prove it was CRISPR if he ate crackers.
No, but they did. They had big signs up everywhere saying, "Please make sure you haven't eaten for at least an hour."
Yeah, so that they want to reduce the noise, right?
We call that soggy, not CRISPR. But keep going.
Yeah. So CRISPR is basically looking for the gene pattern of the virus itself, and they have now perfected the system in such a way that you can basically put your so what's happening in that tube is that there's a little bit of reagent, and when you stick it in, it not only kills the virus, it starts dismembering it, right? And you only need a certain piece of it, and basically when you put it in the lab is almost as like a little fat credit card, right? And then you stick it in there, and it does this thing inside this fat box, and like then you read it.
Mark, let me interrupt. Mark, do you remember the expression from college, blue balls?
So have I talked about my musical instrument collection lately? I've got 2 basses, a guitar, a banjo, a Turkish oud, another oud, 2 acoustic guitars.
We are never going to get the answer from Sanjay on this. Am I correct, Sanjay? You're not going to tell us?
I have a few flutes as well.
Oh, you are? You are? You promise you're getting there? You're not just running on the clock?
So
battery only has 5 hours on it.
I was just going to say,
Keep going. We're listening.
CRISPR is one of the methods, and my sense is a lot of the universities are using CRISPR. It does give you a result within an hour. Remember, 3 days versus an hour. Big difference, right?
Oh, that's fast.
And by the way, PCR sometimes takes 2-3 weeks. And it's not that the CRISPR test itself is taking that long.
Telegraph operator.
Consumables. They don't have pipette tips. They don't have reagents. And because they use so much of it, and they're trying to do this at scale, one of the 11 components, consumables, is running out. And so your sample is in a freezer. It hasn't been opened up. So that's
remember that thing when we were kids where they would say, but for the nail, the shoe was lost, but for the shoe, the ankle was lost, but for the ankle, the horse was lost? That's this. That's our government all over again.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the gestation period of the virus is such that if it starts taking more than a week, it's kind of useless, right? I mean, you could be completely, contagious, and, what is the point of taking that test, right? I mean, you might as well keep going around.
Like an hour is reasonable. Anything beyond that is not.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah. I understand the reason they're actually taking so long is this is actually the plan is that you take the test, And then while you're waiting for the results, you go out without your mask on. You go to like events at Mount Rushmore. You go to bars and you sit at the bar. You don't sit just in the restaurant area. And you enjoy yourself and you wait for the results to come back. So this is really a secret plot by QAnon and the government to actually get us out mingling. Because when that test comes back, that's the answer.
I've always known that you were Q.
You don't like that reasoning. Okay, keep going, Sanjay.
So even 12 hours is not good enough, is my opinion. And 1 hour or so, as you say, Mark,
that's reasonable.
Is reasonable. 1 hour means you can go to the airport, do your test, go through security, get your test result, and if you're negative, you're getting your boarding pass, right? And if everyone does that, you are assured that everyone in that plane is negative. So I don't mind sharing the seat next door to me.
Unless they went to Mount Rushmore in that intervening hour.
Yeah, exactly. And, in that intervening hour, you're, asked to not,
you're semi-quarantined for that hour. So
Mark,
it's like going through customs.
Mark, can you and I stipulate that a faster test is probably better?
I'd have to talk to my lawyer about that.
So
my stipulations and recitations come through my lawyer.
Keep going, Sanjay.
Yes. So, in fact, when I first started thinking about this, there are several things that, are like almost requirements to really get the whole country to be comfortable with testing and having, mingling with just negative folks, right? So it needs to be extremely scalable. If you have, remember, even now to an extent, but not so much anymore, if you have, temperature and all that will test you. Well, the horse is bolted already, right? So that doesn't make sense. You want to test pretty much everybody, including asymptomatic people.
Sanjay, have you thought about paying people? Wouldn't that be the way to do it? Which, if you want everyone to get tested, you should do like an inverse taxation. You should pay them in accord with their income.
Well, so that would be like
there's
a business model around that called TSA free.
I mean, good health is like paying people, right? So you don't even need to pay people, but if you paid them, yes, they'll be willing and raising the hand. The problem now is, again, back to consumables and how long it takes, right? So that's why, because it was so limited in availability, they said, who should we target now? And the frontline workers and then people with symptoms. So it was like really, it didn't, so because without the scale, it didn't make sense. And then, the result, time to result, anything like approaching 24 hours is already too late, in my opinion, right? 1 hour is good. Okay, 2 hours, 3 hours maybe, but after 12 hours, it's like almost useless. And
you are making a convincing case that it needs to be scalable and it needs to be fast. Keep going. What else do we need?
And then finally,
I think he's working something up here, Mark.
Accuracy and sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
So now
accurate.
Yeah. So there's nothing. So there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So you can't have it fast and be 100% accurate, right? So if you remember from your probabilities class, right? If you take the same test at 80% accuracy or 0.2% inaccurate, 0.2 times 0.2 is 0.04. So it starts going down, right? So if you're negative with a 0.8% accuracy test, the likelihood that you'll actually be, positive because it was false negative is
Mark, can we stipulate that Sanjay's math was correct there?
Again, I cannot answer without counsel.
So the point here is
I'm taking the fifth.
PCR is considered the gold standard.
Yeah.
It has 90% plus accuracy, but not 100% itself.
And it's not scalable.
But it's not scalable. So the point that most people are saying is, would you rather have something that 80% accurate and being able to do this every week or every month even versus 90%, 93% accuracy, and you get to do this once every 6 months. Because
what is this every 6 months thing? That's a new one. What about where did the every 6 months come in? We can never do that.
I'm just saying, if everyone waited 6 months, there are enough tests for everybody, right?
Oh, I see.
Yes, but it's going to be even useful. So now for 6 months we shut down the economy.
So your point is it's scalability. I hadn't really thought of this, but scalability is actually implicitly a factor of time.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. If you take a long time to deliver a result, you're not. The 12 hours, you're not doing other things. You're waiting for the darn thing, right?
So my work as a lawyer is really scalable. It's just you have to wait longer.
Yeah, scalability matters. speed
the results terrible.
Results matter. Then accuracy matters, but you can, do many more tests and mitigate the accuracy issue. And
right.
This is where the FDA is holding fast.
What you're saying, just to interrupt, what you're saying is that nobody would disagree that it needs to be scalable. Nobody would disagree that it needs to be fast. But the question is, with all the trade-offs involved, what degree of accuracy are you willing to accept in terms of false positives and negatives? What's the answer?
And so there's this, your listeners, and you may know, there's this concept that came about after Ebola called EUA, Emergency Use Authorization.
Right.
So, the whole, FDA approval process, it can take years and all that. EUA is a fast track, and sometimes you can get an EUA within weeks, right? So there are EUAs for testing as well.
Right.
For testing equipment, testing methodology, all sorts. There are EUAs, there are over 300 EUAs that have been handed out since this pandemic started in the U.S.
Yeah.
But the gold standard is still, in my opinion, wrong, right? I mean, You're using the wrong yardstick. I mean, this is a yardstick, very much about biology and chemistry and all that. And they could be very well be other methods. CRISPR is one. There's one that has to do with, VOC, it's called, volatile organic compounds that come out of the breath. And the 1% is very unique to different people. And also they put out things that you have inside you.
Well, wait a minute. If we're talking VOCs, then we ought to talk California because they're good at regulating those things.
Yes, especially coming out of the automobile, right?
Right. And paints and everything else. Okay, but not humans.
Yeah. And then there are other methods that are non-biology based, which are like physics based, like mass spectrometry. And that it delivers results in seconds, right? And then the funny thing is with one, sample, you can say, all right, and basically it's a data processing problem.
Mark wants to know what mass spectrometry is because he's not watched enough episodes of, was it NCIS, the original one based in Washington? Because
is that the one with the lady with the pigtails?
Yes, and she called him, what is it, Captain Mass Spec or something? She liked her mass spectrometer, but we never knew what it was. All we knew is it occasionally went on the fritz. So what is it, Sanjay?
So in 10 seconds, what mass spec is, and it's been around for decades, it's basically measuring how the mass of the core components of anything. So anything you ingest from drinks to food and all has gone through a mass spec analysis. So basically how it works is you put that sample, let's say Coke or some unknown liquid. Coca-Cola, you put it in there and you zap
Mark
it.
might be confused otherwise.
Yeah, I know. You zap it with a laser. And what it does is it ionizes all the components and becomes gaseous.
Wait a minute, stop. Are you telling me my food has been not irradiated, but has been mass spectrometized?
Not your actual food, but the predecessor for that bite that you're going to have.
Oh, do they really test food that way, Sanjay?
Yeah, not everything, right? But a few things, right? So when you see the manufacturer's label at the back, how do they know it's 0.001% of sugar?
Oh.
This is the analysis that they're going to.
Wait a minute, this is a serious question. I've assumed that was always based on the recipe, which they probably showed to the rabbis.
We don't care about the recipe, right? It may have gone through all sorts of contamination, blah, 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 a little bit of, lead coming off the lead cauldron or whatever, right? We more care about the output. And
but wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on.
The FDA and was it the agricultural department?
No, the USDA. USDA.
The USDA is testing the output of that.
No way.
When it's about to be
output of the manufacturing process.
No way.
Exactly.
No way. Wait a minute. I didn't know this was true, but let me ask you this. Then are they not required to report all the rat hairs and the rust and all the crap that must invariably be in that food?
That's another department. Not my job.
Yeah. So it's basically saying what are the basic components, and the basic components are measured by when you irradiate with the laser, the ionized stuff all flies.
Okay, we're going to have to stipulate here again, Mark. Are you ready yet to stipulate that Sanjay's assertion that our food is tested by mass spectrometry and therefore we should be comfortable with it is indeed
if I
true?
read his attestation, which should be notarized.
Okay, so we'll go with you.
We are, doing this podcast with at least one lawyer among us.
It's always one too many, too.
Okay, keep going. So Sanjay, I think you look serious, even if we do this audio only and not video. You look serious, and you're telling me that mass spectrometry, we know it's been around forever. You're telling us it's even used on our food, and therefore we should be comfortable with it.
And by the way, it's used in many places, right? So when you go through TSA, and every once in a while they say, show your palm. And
that's only when Mark is nearby.
They rub with a little thing, and then they stick that thing in a machine. That's a mass spec machine, right? That is now looking for different signature of bomb-making material, which, by the way, even if you wash your hands, soap and water and all, there is very, very microscopic elements of it.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for.
Well, that's what they tell me on NCIS. And I will argue, by the way, if you are practicing, as I gather you must be, for your pitching, this is the thing to focus on and less on the food one. But keep going.
Yeah. So, and by the way, they do it for, breathalyzer at the when.
How about the cop? When the cop does the breathalyzer, that's the mass spec?
That's more VOC, but still there's an element of mass spec and all. So now using the same methodology, if you start irradiating, the sample you took from your nose.
Must be the better way Mark was looking for.
Yeah. So, and the saliva and all, put it on this plate and irradiate it with the laser. You'll get a histogram. And if
why hasn't anyone done this before? This seems like it's so obvious.
We don't know what this is yet.
Oh, I think it has to do with mass spec. Mr. Mass Spec or Captain Mass Spec, whatever it is. Major Mass Spec. That was it. Major Mass Spec.
Yeah. So, that's a very good question, Dave. My view is...
Mark, I get points for that.
It's called silos, right? If you're living in a silo, you don't see anything outside your silo. And mass spec world, all the experts and all, they're very much lab people.
Can I get Fox TV in my silo?
I don't know.
No.
Okay, keep going.
I'm going to stipulate that the answer is no.
Thinking outside the box, thinking outside the silo. I mean, people think of mass spec as a way to do analysis of all these other things like food and bomb making stuff. And they've never thought of saying, perhaps we can also irradiate the human sample and see if there's traces of this stupid virus.
So let me ask you this. Why is it that, so the way PCR works is that you're breaking down the DNA into at least sizable chunks, if you will, that can be amplified, and then when they're amplified, you can now look for chunks, if you will, segments that are signatures for whatever DNA sequence is, for an example, in the virus. How does PCR work if it's essentially obliterating, which is, I think, what you're doing? You're obliterating the sample. Why does that work? Well, that makes sense for
PCR, right? Now,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean mass spec. I meant mass spec.
You're obliterating, but
So
still,
why do you?
the histogram is, think of it as a fingerprint. The fingerprint is still unique, right? And so, the fingerprint is going to be there. If you went way deep in the, nasal cavity, maybe the histogram will have higher peaks, but the peaks where they occur is still going to be the same.
But what you're saying is, but the way mass spec works is it obliterates these samples down to, I assume, the molecular level, or it's certainly not the atomic level, because let's say the molecular level.
It's ions, right? It's charged particles, and then there's a detector.
Okay.
If it is a light particle, it flies further. If it's a heavy particle, it flies less. And when you put it on its side, you see histograms.
But if Mark had laughed up M&Ms like I had, and you took the sample from his nose, so now you have all the mass spec M&Ms, which would probably have to dominate the inside of his nose.
There's a second part to this, right? If you just take the mass spec, you'll see a bunch of garbage because of your M&Ms and other things, right? As well as the virus, right? So then there's machine learning.
Wait a minute, Mark, look at Mark squirming. He's going to get sick on us. Look at him.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Just ignore the one with the law degree.
This is what the virus signature looks like, and you.
But how do you separate that out from the noise? How do you separate out from the noise, which is the M&Ms, the boogers, the dust I've been breathing in out here? How do you separate it out?
So this is the machine learning part, right? So this is where a lot of the IP is, and this is why from the same sample, you can say,
IP lawyer, by the way.
This is, yes, I know. We might be looking for one. So this
I
is
have some good recommendations.
This is the signature of SARS-CoV-2. Look at Mark. I think we really got
some
to
fine law firms in Waltham.
Keep going.
We really got to him now, Mark.
You got me.
So Sanjay,
Yes.
are you trying to solve this problem?
Oh, is that a line from that show?
No, I just
Oh,
was asking him. I know the answer to the question.
Oh, yeah. Keep going.
I think if we could solve this, it'd be great. But again, because the topic of your podcast about failure, the fact that little me is trying to do this and not the federal government says something about
That is scary.
it.
So wait a minute. We go back to
It's scary too. Yeah, I know.
I like being included in that we. Wait a minute. How do I get in on this? Is this like getting in on the hydroxychloroquine scam?
I know just where to send you for that one.
So let me ask you this.
You know, the My Pillow guy's got some substance that he's hawking now.
Ooh.
If we apply machine learning to hydroxychloroquine, do we end up being okay? In other words, just because you're using machine learning, how do we know this is going to work?
So you need to know if it is pure virus, what it looks like first, right? So you get your histogram, your signature, right?
Yes, but that signature is completely clouded by the boogers, the M&Ms.
No, because it finds that stuff out.
When you see lab grown with no other noise, you know this is the control. This is the true signature of a virus. And then you take the swab from your nose, and there's of course all sorts of noise, and you're saying, is there this pure signature inside this histogram? And you or I couldn't tell it at all because we don't have AI built into our heads, right?
Okay, wait a minute. Let me try an analogy in real time, which is scary. Let's say that I understand, but I don't travel. I understand there are beaches that have like really red sand or really interesting sand, right? Or beaches that have white sand, purely white sand beaches that are highly sought after, just like viruses. And I understand there are beaches that are largely tan, where though they appear to be tan, it's really a mixture of tan and white and black and red, right? Because that's where all the little stones, that's the colors of the original stones that the sand is made from. Now, if I take a handful of red sand that I picked up in person from a red sand beach, Mark's sending us Morse code, SOS. He's saying, get me out of here. So if I take a handful of red sand and throw it onto the beach of sort of tan sand, and I mix it around a little, how am I going to be able to detect in point of fact that some of the sand, when I subsequently sample it, because all the damn particles look the same, how am I going to be able to tell that this sample has been polluted, if you will, with red sand from a beach?
I think you're overcomplicating.
No, but this is what it is.
I don't have a scientific background.
Yes, but
it sounds like they have a pattern. No. This algorithm that recognizes that pattern.
This is what makes science has thrown science into such ill repute. You've got people coming up and saying, "Don't worry, it's machine learning."
Well, I mean, we don't need to call it machine learning. Let's call it a signature histogram of the pure virus. Right?
But how does that come out? That's what I'm trying to understand. How does that come out? Is my sand analogy roughly fair?
Actually, you lost me on the sand.
Terrible.
But let me tell you how. Let's say the virus has 3 peaks at these 3 masses, and they look short, tall, short at 600 Daltons, very tall at 1200 Daltons, and short again at.
Wait, before you say, I'm with you.
Daltons. That's your signature.
No. Let's postulate that those peaks, the molecular weights or ionic weights at which those are peaks, those very ions occur in other substances, and could
right. But the probability of these 3 in this ratio appearing becomes less and less. And by the way, if and there aren't only 3 peaks, there are many more peaks, and so the combination. So there's really again it's a fingerprint. The problem
sounds like a fingerprint. It's unique.
Is exactly in that order is very, I mean, yes, it might happen, but the probability is so low. And
so what you're saying is you take a sample from somebody, you take was it saliva work for this stuff? Is it saliva or you need nose
saliva work? It's
boogers or whatever? Okay, you take a booger out of Mark's nose. You stick it in major mass spec, and you explode it with your laser beam or whatever it's done with a flame. And now you have a bunch of ions and you measure the molecular weight of those to see where you have peaks. What you're saying is that if it turns out that Mark has this virus in his system in any quantity, his peaks, when you look at the whole bunch of them, will be a little more prominent in these, what is it, 100 points?
Let's say those 3 peaks that we talked about, right?
Okay.
It'll be more prominent than yours.
But not substantially more prominent, just a little more prominent.
It'd be, by the way, with naked eye, you can't even tell. Right. Why you use the computers to do your heavy lifting.
I think, David, you're getting caught up in some of it. It sounds like it's like the equivalent of an iris scan, where there's a unique signature that comes out, and no matter what you do, it's going to look like that.
And the funny thing, Mark, is you're right in the right direction anyway.
Better than the stupid sand analogy.
The irises are so unique, and every one of them is different. Right. Here, fortunately, there's no uniqueness per individual. There's only 2 or 3. In fact, this is why PCR and CRISPR, when the virus mutates, and by the way, these viruses are smart enough that they mutate. Now suddenly your method is not going to work. Here, yes, you're now going to start looking at a slightly different pattern, but if you can figure out the pure.
I have a genius question.
You can actually change what you're looking for instantaneously.
Mark, I have a genius question. I will attribute it to Mark because he is struggling with the M&Ms in his nose. Has mass spec been used to detect other viruses successfully?
Oh, mass spec, as I just said earlier, has been used to detect the AIDS virus. Very, very successfully.
So take that, David.
And many other things, right? And by the way, mass spec does get used, in detecting.
Why isn't it readily adopted by the industry for virus detection?
Oh, because it's okay. Amazing question.
That was my question.
Write it down, Mark. That was a amazing question. Not even great.
For the listening audience, I texted him that question.
So the reason this has been considered the wrong tool for biological material is that the component parts of biological material is very heavy. It's not like food and all that different things where you can break it down to the elements and molecules. The viruses have these proteins, and the proteins are heavy, and the sensitivity of a mass spec to detect a whole protein. I mean, those machines.
Are you suggesting that you have to run the mass spec on somebody's? You have to chop their whole arm off and obliterate that in the mass spec machine, or do you mean something else?
It's just that yes, it can detect it. Mass spec can detect it, but it doesn't scale because these machines are the ones that can take the whole protein and say there's that protein. Those cost millions of dollars, and it's room.
But let me ask you this: if there were a solution out in the hypothetical universe where the mass spec machine were less expensive and lighter and to be carried around like a tricorder, would that be a useful solution?
Of course, and that's what I think some people are attempting.
Oh,
so there's a mass spec that can pick out a whole protein that's as big as your living room and $5 million, right? And people like the Koch Institute and all those, they have it. Rodents have it, and they know they can detect it. That's not a problem.
By the way, if they make money from that, who will they donate it to?
Country to get to million tests a day. No, it doesn't work. However, we just talked about the explosives detection at the airport, and you've seen those, I think. They're about 2 feet by 6 inches by 6 inches. Why is it small? And I imagine it's about $10,000 each. And the reason is it's single function.
I would actually have seen the ones in the airport, but I'm usually too busy making sure the person in front of me is not stealing my laptop.
It's a single function and it's small. And I imagine, I haven't looked up the pricing, but I imagine thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars.
So
right?
let me ask us.
You can now put it in every airport and put, one per lane, and so every airport might have 100 of them.
Right.
Now that's what we're trying to get to.
Oh.
A scaled national network of testing systems that is like a bomb detection system.
Let me ask you this: who are the Koch brothers? Or actually, there's only one of them now, I guess, right?
Well, there's still two of them, but one of them has always been inactive.
Okay, so the Koch brother with a parent asked parent, are they putting their money into the Lincoln Project, or what? What are they funding?
Definitely not.
Year? Oh no, they're not. Do you guys know? I mean, are they never Trumpers?
I don't think they're participating in this. I think they're pleased with what's going on overall.
Oh,
Maybe
really?
not like the messenger, but they like the message.
Okay, so Sanjay, you have Mark and me convinced. Where do we sign up?
Well, will you call it the tricorder?
Love it. Yeah, beam me up, Scotty. Oh, that's the wrong thing.
Oh my gosh.
This is why we generally mandate no phones.
What is that? Oh, that's
the tricorder sounds.
Oh, that's the tricorder. Okay, so Sanjay, this sounds good. So to wrap up this otherwise fine podcast, and I can't imagine this would do anything other than lose business for you.
Well, he didn't talk about anything, so.
No, I think he just said the system is a failure, and I think I agree
with that. So the core point that Sanjay was exploring was that it is the coronavirus response is a massive fail.
Yeah,
and we're of course the kings of failure here.
Yes, and so he came to the right place to tell that story.
So and then there's some conjecture of some ways to mitigate this failure.
I detected that one of those solutions was particularly good.
Mass spec for everyone.
Yeah, major mass spec to you.
Right.
Oh, that's good. And so I guess we're just gonna have to.
I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but mass spec to your CVS, at your airport, at your university. Yeah, it
makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
I know that I've started going back to my gym, which is reopened with a lot of precautions. And one of the things they do.
Well, that's only because you're going back.
Well, no, but one of the things they do, they ask you 5 questions, they look at you, and then they take your temperature.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can't enter if it's above or below a certain threshold. To me, something that is as simple as I put my head against this thing and it says red light, green light is the way to go. It would be a big winner. And I think you'd see it in gyms and libraries and supermarkets and, transportation places and all that.
I mean, we had a big event, I think we had a big event on September 11th, 2001, right?
Oh, I heard of it.
And then there was this new federal response, and and TSA was born, and they came up with rules, and you have to take your shoes off and do all this thing.
Yep.
We'll get used to that, right? I mean, and very quickly, the flying public, was back at it, and the economy, although it suffered for a few years, was at it. I mean, have a federal response like that, I'm not sure, we'll
so
ever.
That indeed is. I mean, what you're pointing out is absolutely the big failure. I think you're exactly right. That's the right analogy. I mean, that was 3,500 people killed.
Was not responding to Ebola and SARS by putting in place the TSA equivalent on the microbe side.
Yeah, exactly right. And by the way, I think we're lulled into thinking, oh, we're the United States. Nothing will come this way.
That's magical thinking.
SARS, Ebola, there were a few cases in Colorado and all that, but it will never be big.
We are separated by large oceans. What can possibly cross a large ocean?
Planes fly over those oceans, and people are very much, in mixing with each other. And I'll tell you, I hadn't seen the movie Pandemic before in the lockdown. When I saw it, I thought, holy cow, they knew about all of this. They predicted all of this. And they predicted to such precision that I'm like, people probably thought this is just sci-fi.
Did they predict?
It became a documentary.
Oh, did you see Pandemic? You saw it?
Yeah.
Was it good?
Oh, it's worth watching if you haven't watched it.
Did you ever see the Andromeda Strain?
I remember that one.
Well, that was
also like it. I like
Michael Crichton.
Okay. Well, Sanjay, this was super enlightening. I would think Mark would agree, except he's got M&Ms coming out of his nose still.
I always do.
So, and you think we won't lose audience or lose business for you if we actually post this as a podcast?
I think you can do what you wish. I didn't say
Nobody listens to this anyway. Mark and I occasionally listen to it, but we try not to.
No, I don't.
But you might have the other effect, right? Which is suddenly people are so curious about this methodology that your business, your listening public, will go up by millions of folds.
And then, yet that would have zero impact on our lives.
No, I think you want to go and get a few sponsors, and then suddenly, you can quit your day jobs.
I bet there's some startups that you know about who would love to sponsor a budding podcast about failure.
There's nothing budding about what we're doing. We're hardly the new ingenues.
There we go. That's a word I don't regularly use, but
I'm sorry I didn't make it out to the CIC, but after this type of podcast, I think we should just have a strong drink somewhere.
I would